Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Town Hall here at Angelo State. We are glad to have you. The fall of semester is approaching very quickly, and we've had a lot of questions about athletics and events associated with athletics, and we're hoping to answer some of those questions for you today. I'm Becky Bracken, a moderator for this session, and I'm also Communications and Marketing Director for Angelo State. The slides you saw as you were joining were just housekeeping slides to let you know what to expect. Your microphones are muted, and the session is being recorded, so it can be played back later if you want to watch it again or tell friends about it. Also, just remember that everything that we say and do today will be available at angelo.edu/commitment. So at this point, I'll call on James Reed, our Director of Athletics, to say a few words and introduce our panel today. Thanks, James.
Thank you, Becky. I'm so excited to be a part of today's town hall regarding athletics here at Angelo State University. I have joining me today Ms. Joelle Sefcik, Associate Athletic Director of Academic Services and Senior Women's Administrator, and Mr. Kevin Pepper, who is the Development Officer for Athletics. I want to start today with a brief statement, and then we will move into some question and answer time. What an ever-changing world we are living in with regards to college athletics. It is a landscape that seems to be changing daily. It is a time where there seems to be more unknowns than knowns. Angelo State Athletics and Angelo State University have maintained the position from day one of the pandemic that we want our kids to be able to practice and play. And therefore, we began last spring working on a plan that would allow for that as long as sports happened. The plan was constructed with the main consideration as keeping everyone safe that would be involved in coaching, playing, officiating, and spectating sporting events. The NCAA, through the Sports Science Institute, has provided a set of guidelines that can be adopted to each campus and sport to ensure safety in athletics. I am confident in saying that using these guidelines, along with state and local health recommendations, and with guidance from our local health medical professionals, Angelo State has put together a very comprehensive plan to allow for participation in athletics while mitigating the risks posed by the coronavirus. Today, we're going to have an opportunity to discuss these issues and others regarding athletics at Angelo State. I'll turn it back over to you now, Becky.
Thanks, James. So we are going to get into questions that were pre-submitted for the session, and then after that, we will be happy to answer any questions that you would like to put over in the Q&A section. If you'll open the Q&A panel, attendees, you'll see that you can put questions there. We won't write our answers to those, but we'll save them and we'll answer them at the end if we have time. To speak to part of what James was talking about, we've been talking about this since January. COVID-19 came on the scene, and we immediately started talking about it and realized that we were dealing with, and we kept saying that we were dealing with a rapidly evolving situation. I think at that time we thought it was going to rapidly evolve and end, and didn't have any idea that 8 months later, we're nearly in August, that it would still be a rapidly evolving situation. And I want to assure everybody on our town hall today, we're going to give the best answers we have right now, and again, it's still a rapidly evolving situation, and the answers we give today may change next week, but we will be as transparent as we possibly can with what we know now. So let's get into some questions that have come in ahead of today. James, I'll ask you first. Who is making the decision about whether or not there will be fall sports? Would that be the Lone Star Conference or the NCAA?
Well, Becky, ultimately the NCAA has the final vote. Obviously, as an NCAA Division II institution, we are a member of the NCAA. The governance structure that is in place for items such as this in dealing with championships and sports and things of that nature is such that it has to move through several committees, one of which is Championships Committee. And that is the committee that actually oversees and conducts championships throughout the year for our student athletes. Eventually, as it moves through the level of committees, it ends up with the Council of Presidents, which is made up of presidents from all the conferences in Division II, and they have the final vote. Now, based upon those decisions that come down from the national office, then the Lone Star Conference and our member schools will then take the information that we're given from the NCAA and work to fit it into our athletic programs and our seasons, as long as we're complying with those guidelines.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question for you, James, deals with fans. The question is, if there are fall sports, will fans be able to attend? And if so, what is the seating going to be like to keep social distancing?
Well, that's a good question, and I've had this question posed to me many times over the last 4 or 5 months. Obviously, we want fans there. Our student athletes want fans there. They enjoy playing in front of the Ram Fam. What that looks like ultimately is dictated by what the state of Texas will allow. Currently, guidelines are allowing for 50% capacity. We're obviously hoping that by the time we get to games, that we will have the ability to have more than 50% there. As far as seating arrangements are concerned, we're obviously going to comply with all CDC and health department guidelines regarding the social distancing requirements. We will make sure that we educate those that choose to come to our venues about what the guidelines and the recommendations are. And then obviously we'll be constantly monitoring this throughout the events to ensure that social distancing is being practiced. And our goal is to have as many members of the Ram Fam as we can in the stand.
All right. So we've got a question about season tickets. I know when we started talking about this town hall, we had a question about if someone purchased season tickets and the number of games changed, what would happen? But now I understand tickets are going to be a little bit different. So would you talk about that, James?
Yes, ma'am, for sure. We kind of started early on discussing season tickets and what it was going to look like when we began discussing how many people we could have in our venues. And we began looking at other universities across the country, both Division II, Division I, Division III, other entities to kind of see what was going on, what was being successful. And after looking at information out there and vetting different plans against social distancing recommendations, we have decided to sell game day general admission tickets only this year. So we won't have any season tickets available this year. It'll just be general admission and game day tickets so that we can comply with the social distancing aspect of putting people in the stands.
I muted myself and had to take a minute to get back on. Thank you for that answer. Appreciate it. Kevin, this question's going to be for you. The big question among students and the community is, will we have Ram Jams this year?
Yeah, great question, Becky, and it's been asked by many people. And we love Ram Jam. Our fans love Ram Jam. So once the football schedule is solidified, we'll monitor the COVID-19 environment just like we do with everything else, and make sure we can have Ram Jam in a safe and healthy way. Is first and foremost. We'll monitor and follow current guidelines from the state and local government, as well as university policies. Ram Jam is important to our culture, the culture of the Ram Fam, and we want to continue this popular tradition, but do it in a way that's safe for our alumni, fans, and friends.
Okay. Everything is going to be about trying to keep people safe this year on campus and Ram Jam and everywhere. James, this question comes back to you. What are the procedures if coaches, athletes, cheerleaders, or support staff test positive for COVID-19?
Yes, ma'am. That's obviously a question we get a lot from some of our parents of our student athletes, and how we're going to handle everything. And what I can say is that our risk management team, along with our campus administration, our local health professionals, along with the guidance from the Lone Star Conference and NCAA, Again, we put together some stringent policies and procedures regarding COVID-19. These include pre-arrival screens, daily wellness screens, testing procedures, obviously isolation and quarantine for any positives if necessary. We have a very thorough plan in place, not only for our student athletes and coaches, but this is campus wide. It's for our entire student body and our campus community. It's a plan that we feel keeps the health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff at the forefront. And, we feel like it's a great plan. Obviously, as we begin moving through things, might have to pivot and shift, but it's been vetted, and I think based upon what we've seen so far, it's a very solid plan to keep our kids and our staff and our campus community as a whole safe.
That's a great point. That is the plan for the whole campus. So, and all of that is available again at that website I mentioned earlier, angelo.edu/commitment, about our commitment to a safe return to campus. James, one of the questions also was, have there been any positive cases in athletics so far? I'll let you answer that, but very similar answer, I think.
Well, I think so. As far as individual medical information is concerned, that's all confidential, so we can't divulge that. However, I know that at angelo.edu/COVID-19, the number of cases that we've had at ASU is updated daily, if I understand correctly. So anyone can go to that website at any time and see what the number of cases we are having on campus are with regards to that. But I can't divulge any personal information because it's confidential.
All right, thank you. Next question, James. We've talked about what happens if athletes or anyone gets sick. What are the plans to try to keep people healthy and safe and keep them from getting sick?
Yes, ma'am. And again, I think these are questions that often overlap, and but that's okay. I don't think that myself or our staff or our campus community as a whole can say it enough what we're doing to ensure that we're keeping our campus community as safe as possible. And I don't think that if there was any doubt that we could do that, that our campus administration would allow our kids to come back. And so, ultimately, keeping our kids, our athletes in this case, healthy and safe, that's our number one goal. But that's our number one goal every year. This year it just happens to involve some COVID-19 stuff. But we have a very stringent policy with regards to everything surrounding our athletes' health and wellness. And so it's nothing new. It's just, an added on portion dealing with the coronavirus. But we do have quite a lengthy process in place that I mentioned earlier that will ensure that we're protecting our student athletes, coaches, and support personnel. It starts with education first and foremost. What we try to do is educate our staff and then get our staff to educate our student athletes around the expectations and the procedures involving athletics participation and returning to campus. And I think, we just have to keep educating them on what we're expecting them to do, what the expectations of the campus are, and, the guidelines that are set forth by the CDC and so forth. So we do have a pre-arrival screen, which we're screening kids before they ever come onto campus. There is a 7-day waiting period once they get here before they can access our athletic facilities. Our IT department at Angelo State is undoubtedly the best in the country. We've created a daily wellness screen, which is on their phone. It allows our students and student athletes to answer the screening questions, and they get a badge that shows up on their phone that allows them access into the building, saying that everything's good. We're doing temperature checks. We obviously have facial covering requirements. We are implementing social distancing when available. And one thing that we decided early on is that I required our entire athletic department staff, as well as many other campus community members, to complete a 7-hour course through Johns Hopkins University related to contact tracing and COVID-19 issues. And there was twofold for us. Obviously, within the athletic department, what I wanted them to be able to do was to be educated about the COVID-19 issues and how they come into play when we start talking about grouping our athletes for practices and workouts and training situations, and how to maximize the safety and well-being of all the parties involved on, distancing ourselves as we're coaching, making sure that we get our kids set in certain groups and they stay with those groups so that we can keep things contained if something were to happen. But all of this is done with the purpose of allowing our student athletes to continue to do what they love to do, which is play.
Okay. I would imagine too that just like some offices have had to make accommodations with plexiglass screens, and I know our classrooms are going to look different this year with reduced capacity and some desks being marked as unusable. So I'm sure there are things too that in athletics that you've had to adjust to keep COVID from spreading, or try to prevent the spread too. All right. Um, I'm going to throw the next question to Kevin. Um, in fact, I'm going to ask you several questions, Kevin. So you're on the spot for a minute. So, what, if anything, is going to be different about Ram Club's support of athletics this year?
That's a good question, Becky. And the answer to that is the Ram Club is the sole fundraising arm for ASU athletics, and the Ram Club is going to continue to be dedicated to providing funds to the athletic department in support of our coaches and student athletes. The Ram Club is going to continue to provide funds for recruiting, equipment purchases, and academic support, as well as enhancing the overall experience of our student athletes. So none of that has changed. We have students that are coming back on campus, and they're going to need to be supported like they always have from the Ram Club. So that support's going to continue as normal.
All right, that's fantastic. We know the Ram Club golf tournament was held earlier, and can you tell us more about the blue and gold virtual auction that's coming up in just a week or so?
It is just a week away. August 5th through the 9th is kind of how it's going to be slated. But back to the golf tournament, it was we had it back on June 29th, successful event there. Thanks to the Bank and Trust for sponsoring that, and Paul Talley for his volunteer work in putting that together. But the Phil George Blue and Gold auction is again sponsored by Crockett National Bank this year, so thank you to them. But it's going to be a virtual event, Becky, and we'll be able to provide all the information about the event. It's going to be located at www.angelo.edu//blue gold. That's where you'll be able to find all the event information and how to participate in the raffle, the silent auction, and the live auction. The auction is going to open on Wednesday, August 5th at 5 p.m. For online bidding. And on August the 7th at 7:30 p.m., we'll have a live stream portion of the auction, and Coach Reed and some former student athletes, current student athletes, will be giving testimonials during that time. In that portion of the live auction will end right after that live stream ends. And then the silent auction will close on Sunday, August 9th at 5 p.m. So it'll run 5 days there. It's going to be opened up to thousands of people. Anybody that wants to get on that page and bid on things, we want to encourage that. It's opened up to everyone in the world, basically. And so we're hoping that a lot of people get involved in that this year. That's our biggest fundraiser for athletics. Critical event for us to be able to do the things that we need to do in athletics. But the support from the Ram Club is more critical now than it ever has been in this uncertain environment. Our Ram Club members and those that support the Ram Club golf tournament and the Phil George Blue and Gold auction have been the foundation that provides ASU athletics with the resources that brings home championships, but more importantly, those degrees for those student athletes, and that changes those family trees. So it's very, very important to us.
That's all great news. I think that's fantastic that you could have potentially the biggest audience ever this year, despite having to change gears and put everything online. It's good news for some of us that we won't have to elbow our way to make our bids on the silent auction. We can just sit by our computers and have our bidding wars, right? So that's awesome. Thank you. All right, let's get back into some talk about the schedule for sports. James, I know the last announcement that I heard was that the fall season was going to be delayed by several weeks. When will you have, or when do you think you'll have a schedule for football and the other fall sports?
Well, thank you, Becky. That again is a question I get asked quite frequently. I just feel like I keep going around in circles because a lot of things have not been completely finalized yet. But we are currently working on what the delayed fall schedules will look like. Ultimately, it will depend a lot upon who is still playing. Obviously, if some of our non-conference competitors and/or conference opponents are not playing this fall, which a lot of schools have announced that they're not going to participate in the fall. Some conferences have announced that. So it depends a lot upon who's still standing, if you will. And once we ascertain that, then we'll be able to get creative and create as complete of a schedule as possible for our student athletes to compete and hopefully give an opportunity for our fans to be able to watch us play. Currently, without complete knowns, some of those unknowns, you're kind of having to prepare for a lot of different things. So we're working on many different scenarios so that once we do know and hear final, then we can get that information out as quickly as possible.
All right, that sounds good. I think you used a key word there, creative. I think ever since this started, we've all had to be creative, and our students are going to come out of this whole experience with a lot more ability to be creative and flexible, and a heck of a lot more online experience. So it certainly is a key word. So Joelle, I'm curious about a question for you. Have student athletes had trouble scheduling classes because of COVID-19?
Becky, that is a great question for all of our student athletes in our community that are worried about our kids. As part of the Ram Fam, we have been so blessed, not only this year, but as long as I've been working in athletics, that our faculty and staff at Angelo State do such a wonderful job to accommodate our students whenever there may be an issue that arises with scheduling. So with our coursework going to a lot more online instruction or hybrid instruction to where they have the opportunity to go to class or do their courses remotely, we've been able to work out schedules for all of our student athletes, and we have not seen an issue. Obviously, the university is concerned about the health and safety of our student athletes, and we are too. And these hybrid models have given us the opportunity to work much more effectively with their schedules.
All right, that's good to know. Another question for you, Joelle. What happens to a student athlete's eligibility if they don't get to play a season because of COVID-19?
So this has been a very valid concern that we have had from our student athletes and our staff, beginning with this spring with the cancellation of a lot of our spring sports. We have had to adjust very rapidly to the changing environment with COVID-19, but the NCAA has done a very good job in addressing this issue. And since we have started this in the spring, any student athlete that competes in 50% or less of a season is granted a relief waiver that is automatically applied to them that gives them another year of eligibility back. So it gives them those semesters to practice as well as their season of competition semesters back to be able to compete. So it's very beneficial. The NCAA is doing everything that they can to not penalize student athletes for what's going on around them with issues that they can't control. So these season of competition waivers have been very beneficial for all of our student athletes.
That's really good to know. Flexibility again is the key. That's wonderful. James, I think we've talked about the schedule quite a bit. One of the questions is specific to basketball, since it starts late in the fall semester. Will the schedules be affected? Will that kind of have to be decided at the last minute, as you were mentioning earlier?
You know, Becky, that's a good question, and it has come up not just for basketball, but for some of our other winter sports and spring sports. You know, you would think, well, spring's quite a ways away. We're only talking about fall right now, but all of it really works hand in hand. And so, you know, basketball is one that's a little unique, much like indoor track, because it covers 2 semesters, where most of our other sports will begin and end in one semester. And so, with their championship segment starting in the fall, but later in the fall, we feel like that there's going to be some time and more information available at, you know, as we move through the semester that will allow them to continue to pretty much on a regular path that they would be doing. Again, I mentioned earlier that, you know, schools that maybe are not participating in the fall, you know, could affect the schedule part of that, because if we're scheduled to play someone in November or December and they're not participating during the fall semester, then obviously there would have to be some adjustment and some pivot. And you know, you mentioned the creativity and the ability to adapt, and I think we've all gotten very good at that. And you know, kudos to our student athletes, because they want to know just as much as everyone else. And I feel bad. I try to keep them up to date directly through emails and then through the coaches. And a lot of times it's, you know, hey, we're still in the trenches battling for you. We want you to be able to play. Our administration is behind you, but we don't have any new answers to give you at this point. But basketball, we feel like should be able to go off without a hitch, depending again upon who's still playing and what that schedule will look like. There has been nothing discussed at this point of winter and spring championships, so that's why we, at this point, can confidently say we feel pretty comfortable about that.
Okay. I just noticed that one of our questions that has come in during the session is how will St. Mary's and ENMU dropping fall competition affect ASU? And I think you've done a really good job answering that. And the second part of that question is there a do or die date that's set to make a final decision for the fall season for all sports? And
Well, you know, as far as a do or die date, I don't have one of those in front of me right now. I don't think anyone has said that. There are obviously some schools that have announced, like the question asked, St. Edward's or St. Mary's and Eastern New Mexico. I think St. Mary's, I believe, is still conducting in-person classes on their campus. But Eastern Mexico, if I read the release correctly, they're going to be online for the fall, and that kind of changes their scenario a little bit. Obviously, we're the largest conference in Division II with 18 schools. We span 4 different states, and so we have a wide range of issues that we deal with. We have small private schools in our conference. We have small private schools that are faith-based. We have smaller public schools. We have medium to larger size public schools and state schools. And like I said, in 4 different states. So everyone's dealing with different issues. But, you know, the Lone Star Conference obviously is, we're the Lone Star Conference and we're proud of that. And so we don't want to leave anyone behind, but we obviously want to do what we can do to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate. And hopefully we can get that accomplished.
all right, awesome. I do have a question that is specific to sports. If a sport such as golf or tennis can socially distance, will it continue on schedule?
I think there's a good chance that that will be able to occur, with the exception of the delayed practice start, which we had that mandate come down from the Lone Star Conference presidents last week, that no fall practices will begin before August 24th. Besides that, I feel really good about the decisions regarding what has been classified as medium and low risk sports. And the NCAA categorizes with regards to the COVID-19 issues, what we call high contact risk sport or high risk contact sports, medium risk sports, and low risk sports. And, most of the ramped up guidelines and procedures are directed toward those high risk sports. With those medium and low risk sports, such as golf and tennis, we feel very confidently that they can pretty much operate business as usual and mitigate the risks quite handedly. Again, it's going to ultimately come down to, we have a fall schedule for those two sports, which does have impact upon their spring championship seasons. But again, are the schools that we had scheduled for the fall, are they still willing to participate, and are they going to be able to participate? So there could be some changes, but those are definitely the sports that we feel the most confident about because they are those low risk contact sports.
Okay, that makes sense. Joelle, another question for you, kind of on the academic side. Are student athletes losing any scholarship money if their seasons are canceled? And if they are, is there a way to help them continue with their school?
This is a great question, Becky. We do understand the concern that our wonderful community has for our student athletes and them being able to move forward. Rest assured that our student athletes will not lose scholarship dollars because of COVID-19 or season cancellations. Our bylaws set forth for our institution by the NCAA prevent that from happening. It protects the student athletes to where they have a year contract, and we are not able to reduce those for a situation such as this. We believe in making sure that our student athletes have what they need for in the classroom and for their field of competition. So anything that we can do to help with that, we will. We are the Ram family and we protect our own.
All right. That's great news. And I think going back to the question, is there a way to help maybe additionally, it's sign up for the blue and gold auction and maybe bid on something.
Yeah,
there.
join in and fight for those online auctions. I'm very excited to not have to elbow people away from everything that I want to purchase. So
That's right. It's usually crowded at those tables. So
join the fun.
Yeah. All right. Moving on back to James for a question. Have we lost any student athletes that decided not to return because of COVID-19?
Becky, not to my knowledge. I have not had a single coach that has come in and said that a student athlete of theirs is not returning or not coming because of their fear of COVID-19 or anything along those lines. So right now, that would be a no answer. We have not had that. And, again, kind of points back to that education process where, we've worked really diligently to educate our student athletes that are coming back, whether they're new or returners, on what our processes will be while we're doing what we're doing, and that is to ensure their safety and get that message to their parents as well, so that they can confidently, send their sons or daughters back to us here at Angelo State.
All right, that's great. Question just came in. Is cross country considered a low risk sport?
Believe it or not, cross country is considered a medium risk sport.
Okay.
And it all is contingent upon the start. And if you're familiar with cross country, obviously once the gun fires, it does become a fairly low risk sport because they get spread out along the course. But because of the way cross country is set up at the start, because of the close proximity of all the athletes on the start line, it does elevate it to a medium risk. And then also at the end of the race, once everyone passes the finish line, they end up in the chute area. Now, there can be some things that I think can be done to help mitigate those risks, but it does fall into a medium risk category, believe it or not.
Well, that is interesting because it looks awfully lonely out there in the middle. All right. Another question has come in, and this goes back to some of the things people look forward to in conjunction with sports, but any updates for Trunk or Treat, Dig Pink, or Midnight Madness events?
Well, Becky, I'll start with that, and then I'll obviously open it up to Kevin or Joelle to jump in. A lot of the things that you just mentioned are things that are conducted through our Student Athlete Advisory Committee, which Joelle is in charge of, so she'll touch on those. But again, I just want to reiterate one of the things that I have been so appreciative of being in the position that I am in is that what we want to do falls very closely in line with our campus administration, and that is that we want to provide as normal of an experience as we can for our student athletes, our students, our entire campus community, and the community of San Angelo that revolve around Angelo State University, Angelo State Athletics, and all the other things that go on our campus. So if we can figure out a way to make it happen and keep everyone safe, then we're going to try to make those events happen as long as we can stay within guidelines. But I'll open it up to Kevin or Joelle to touch base also.
James covered it. Our student athletes love giving back to our community, and the trunk or treat and our Easter egg hunt in the spring are two big events where they get to interact with the children of our community and give back. And anything that we can do to make sure that those events happen, especially since we have the ability to go outside, we'll look forward to that.
That's awesome. I think that's something that we've all talked about, is that it's so important for us to follow our health and safety guidelines, wearing our mask when we're out of our offices and when we're on campus, because we don't want to have to close like we did in the spring. We'd really like to stay open and have the most normal experience we can. So those are really good points, and I'm glad to hear those are still kind of being discussed. So another question come in, and that is, how will recruitment for athletes be affected this upcoming school year?
Becky, I'll address that. Obviously, once back in the spring, the NCAA stopped the winter championships and then eventually canceled the spring championships. They also put a moratorium on recruiting at first and moved us into what was called a dead period, which is no in-person contact on or off campus. There can still be some contact via social media, email, text, calls, things of that nature. And then they just kept updating that as they went along. A couple of things that they did allow is they provided some legislative relief with regards to some of the handling of the recruiting process, where they were actually allowing coaches to involve current student athletes with prospective student athletes on calls, Zoom meetings, and things like that. We did a lot of virtual tours on campus. You know, my hat's off to our especially our basketball coaches. When everything shut down, that was right at the start of their peak recruiting season. But you know, not daily, but pretty close to daily. The arena lights were on and everything was up, and they were walking around showing potential student athletes our facilities. They would be driving across campus, walking, showing them the different buildings and things of that nature, trying to give them as good of an idea of what Angelo State University is about as they could. After that, Division II actually moved into what was called a quiet period, which allows for student athletes to come on campus, but we can't go off campus. And so once that quiet period began back at the start of the summer, then we had potential student athletes on our campus, seeing our facilities, meeting with our coaches, meeting with other staff members and things like that. So it hasn't been normal by any stretch of the imagination, but I think at least on our campus, our coaches have done a wonderful job of being able to sell Angelo State, even if it was virtually.
That's awesome. We couldn't have done that without technology, that's for sure. One last question I think we have here. Will student athletes still be able to move into their dorms as planned on August 1st?
Right now, with the Council of Presidents of the Lone Star Conference pushing back all practices to August 24th, there's really not a need for our student athletes to move in early. So what most coaches have been instructing their kids is they just come when move-in date is. and they can move in with everyone else and get acclimated to campus just like everything, because we will actually have had a week of classes before we can ever start any practices, which is different than what it normally is when our kids have to come in early, because they can begin preseason training and practices prior to classes starting for our fall sports. But now with
Sure.
everyone starting on the same date, then there's not the need for that. But
Okay. So what I understand from residential programs is that they'll be sending emails out to students and giving them times where they can come check in. They'll sign up for a time to come check in. So I guess that's what our student athletes will do as well.
I would
Okay.
assume I visited with Paul Hamilton in Residential Life the other day, and we were going over the drive-through check-in and things that they've got set up and prepared for getting those kids moved in. And so I would assume that. I'm not in charge of that, thankfully, so I will defer to Residential Life.
All right then. Um, one more, I did have one more question come in and want to answer them is there, if they're still coming in. Um, and this is kind of, I guess, an opinion question. Which is a better option at this point for ASU? No fans or restricted fans?
That's a good
So,
question. If it's an opinion question, then I guess I can't answer wrong. Me personally, and I know in visiting with our student athletes and with our coaches, we have such a great home experience and home field or home court advantage because of the support we get from the Ram fam. I believe anyone in the stands is better than no one in the stands. And I guess if we are relegated to that, I'm not sure if we will do the cardboard cutouts like Major League Baseball is, but we will definitely get some fan noise and get it piped in because it, our kids, when they're in the arena of athletics and the competition, they obviously are concentrating on what they're supposed to be doing at that particular time, but they are very aware of our crowd, and they are very aware that they are representing those folks sitting in the bleachers and all the Ram fam, and so they feed off of that. And I think you can talk to every one of our coaches. Even our outdoor sports. You think outdoors, and you think, well, it might not be quite as noisy or something like that. But I know you talk to Coach Brooks. That's huge in the recruiting for him in baseball. When they talk about how many fans we have at baseball. We lead the nation a lot of years in attendance, and that just goes to it's attributed to our Ram fam and the support they give us. And you get softball, and the stands are elevated, and so they get right down there on top, and they can get a lot of noise out there. And I mean, every one of our venues is such that our kids are very aware of the presence of our support that we have, and so we want as many as can be there as possible. If we can't have but half of them, we want the loud half to be there. So, but our kids really do love playing in front of our fans. But that's my opinion, and I do know that they do love that because they tell me, and our coaches express that. But Kevin, Joel, y'all want to add anything?
If it's, like I said, if it's 5 fans, we want them there. Some more than none.
even if they're 6 feet apart, and they'll still be loud. Well, and what I've seen at ASU athletic events is that there are real relationships between our athletes and their fans. They start to know each other, and it's just really heartwarming to see the support that our fans bring to watch our students play. So, well, that was our last question for the day. I think if you have any other questions, audience, I know James Reed, Kevin Pepper, or Well Sefcik would be happy to answer them. You can find them on angelosports.com and find out how to get in touch with them, and they would love to answer your questions. I hope we answered a lot of your questions today, and hope you have a really good afternoon. James, you have anything else you want to add?
Just want to thank everyone for being involved. Obviously, go Rams and Ram Bells.
Great way to end. Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.